One thing young people don't understand about video games is that you don't always have infinite time left. I know when you're young that you think, I'll just get to it one day, I'll develop those good habits one day, I'll start studying one day, I'll start going to the gym one day, I'll start talking to that girl one day. Yes, you have a lot more time than your parents or your older siblings or your teachers or whatever, but you really don't have much time in your life. And I know this is the fallacy of young people. When I was 15, 10 years ago, I was thinking I'll do that eventually, I'll do that someday. And this is how I was with my video game addiction, was that I'll get out of it one day, I'll start a business one day, or I'll get my shit together one day. But it's not always the case. And in this video, I'm going to break down just how quickly your life can pass you by if you don't get your shit together ASAP. My name is Madhu, and I'm helping parents and children alike help rid themselves of video game addiction. I was addicted to video games for 8 out of the past 12 years now, and I've since moved past my addictions, got a job in corporate New York, even started a gaming channel when I was helping people improve their lives by using video games. But now I've transitioned over to simply help parents save their families and get rid of video game addiction altogether. So here's the main thing that people don't understand when it comes to video game addictions. For the most part, gamers don't really understand how brutal real life can be, because and this makes sense, right? Because they're all just spent crouched over a computer, just spamming away, clicking keys and pressing buttons all the time. They don't understand how brutal life can be. And one of the main reasons for this is, parents, if you're watching this, you're one of the main reasons. I know I said I was going to help you out, but listen, the fact that you're insulating your kid from all the hardships of life is part of the reason why they fall into gaming addiction in the first place. If they don't know what it's really like out there in real life, they live in a sort of blissful ignorance, and this can be nice in a sentimental way of like preserving your kid's innocence. At some point, you have to let your kid really know just how difficult life can be, just how hard you had to work to get to where you had to be, just how hard you had to work to maintain the family or raise them. At some point, you're going to have that conversation with your kid about just how ruthless and unforgiving adult life is. And I'm not saying they have to be adults right now, but it's important in times when they're too indulgent that you have to raise the curtains a little bit and show them beyond the facade of what real life is like. I wish my parents had done this for me when I was a kid. Instead, they insulated me from all of the negatives of real life, and they shielded me sort of with their own bodies and their own lives, so to speak. And it only caused my gaming addiction to worsen because I was living in this blissful ignorance of, everything will be fine. I'll get a job one day. My dad is working like 90 hours a week, but it's fine. I'll study one day. I'll get my shit together one day. One day became almost never. And I struggled a lot to get out of my addictions, partially because my parents weren't forthright. They would say it, but they didn't really show it to me. They didn't make it very clear to me how difficult it was out there and how my gaming addiction was, one, keeping the family apart, and two, furthering the family from the goals we set as a family. And even to this day, we're still behind. My family has come leaps and bounds ahead from what it used to be 10 years ago, but we're still behind simply because of the mistakes that I made all those years back, being addicted. Another reason why, and this is for any kids watching this, but mainly for parents, if you want to help your kids out, have them understand how life can operate sometimes. It all comes down to habits at the end of the day. And when you get into the habit of playing video games, loading up video games, buying video games, sort of like that kind of lifestyle, that lifestyle becomes automized for you. And you start to live that life without even thinking about it. It sort of becomes your default setting. And the dangers in that becoming your default setting is that it isn't novel anymore, and you don't have to think as far as like playing video games or spending 5 to 10 hours a day in front of a computer. It doesn't feel weird, it feels normal now. And that's where the real problem is, because once it becomes a habit, it becomes very hard to break. It becomes very hard to break. That's why for any addiction therapy, whether it's like drugs or alcohol or smoking, there's a whole procedure that you have to go through. One of the main things that, especially as parents, that you have to teach your kid is once habits are formed, they can sort of eat away at your life without even you realizing it. Let's say, for instance, when we go to work, right? We've become sort of habituated to going to work now. We know the mundanity, we know like what to expect from our workplace, our coworkers, our managers, our everything, right? You sort of know what you're getting, especially if you've been working for like 6+ months at the same place. Notice how your life, when it comes to work, it almost feels like a void because like it's just sort of like habituated in nature. Like when you go to work, like you know what's going on. Yes, you complain about the time, but eventually it's time for you to clock out and you come home, you spend a few hours with your kids, but then you have to go to bed and then you repeat the same process again, right? Notice how like most of your day was spent at work, but since you're so used to it, it's not like you've lived life. It's just sort of like, this happened. This always happens because I always go to work, and it doesn't feel like a new experience anymore. For kids, video games can be like that. Once you become habituated to playing 6+ hours on the game, it doesn't even seem pleasurable anymore. It's mostly like, this is supposed to be fun, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is that you're just getting used to spending hours and hours and hours on something that doesn't really give you much enjoyment to begin with. And this is the problem when it comes to addicted gamers, is that they become so used to wasting their time and they become so habituated to just wasting their time that it can become very, very hard to take them out of it. So what's the action step? What do we do from here? It's very simple. I'm not telling you to have parental controls or stuff like that. I mean, you can do that in your own time. I'll make a video about that eventually. But as for now, regulate your kids' habits. I'm not saying delete video games altogether because that's a long process and it can take some time. Replace your kids' habits with good ones. If they're spending 7 hours in front of the computer screen, knock it down to 6, and that 1 hour make them go outside or make them go to the gym or do something with the family. With habits, you have to break them systematically. You can't really like take a habit from a person just outright. Unless under extreme scenarios, you would have to slowly break it down. So get started with small things and then progressively overload like you would do at a gym. Also, when regarding to my other point, it's also important to have some difficult conversation with your kid, especially when it relates to adulthood and the prospect of adulthood. Because yes, I understand that they're kids. To a certain degree, they have to be self-indulgent, but it comes a point where that indulgency can create adverse effects, not for them, but also for the family. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is preserve our family and preserve the well-being of our kids, right? So it's important sometimes to have that difficult conversation. This is everything that I wish my parents would have done if they had the insight and the wisdom that I do now when it comes to video game addictions. Please keep this in mind. Have that difficult conversation. Start setting those habits, and eventually your kid will be free of their gaming addiction. If you want more help regarding this and want to schedule one-on-one calls with me, my Discord is $10 a month. Just hit me up in the link below, okay? I'll see you guys in my next video.